Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri. Today, I'm joined by Connecticut's own Liz Mugavero, who is the author of 12 cozy mysteries written under her own name and the pseudonym Cate Conte. I first met Liz at a local writers' retreat in 2007, and we've been friends ever since. I've pestered her on panels, profiled her in magazines, and now made her complicit in this little show. Liz's first series, The Pawsitively Organic Mysteries, launched in 2013 with Needing to Die, which was nominated for an Agatha Award and introduced many of the elements that have become the hallmarks of her stories: animals, healthy living, if you don't count the homicides, and small-town politics and proclivities. 6 books followed, including last year's capper, Murder, She Meowed. As Cate Conte, a name you'll learn more about soon, Liz also writes the Cat Cafe Mysteries for St. Martin's. Set in coastal New England, they feature Maddie James, an amateur sleuth and entrepreneur who converts her grandfather's home into a cat cafe. The series' 4th book, The Christmas Caper A Whisker of a Doubt, is due out in December. Kate's latest, Witch Hunt, marks the launch of her new paranormal mystery series for Kensington. The book introduces protagonist Violet Mooney, a 20-something who makes her home in the charming town of North Harbour, Connecticut, where she owns the Full Moon Crystal Shop. Violet's life is upended when she finds herself a prime suspect in the murder of a disagreeable town councilwoman. And things go from bad to worse when her estranged mother Fiona shows up and announces that she's a witch. As is Violet. Surprise! Kirk has called the book zippy and fun, with an otherworldly hook that's further enhanced by characters with a little magic of their own. But Liz Mugavero, or Cate Conte as the case may be, is quite bewitching herself, and now she's going to cast a spell on you. Hi, everybody. I am joined by Cate Conte today, who is the author of Witch Hunt, the first in a new series from Kensington, which publishes on Tuesday, June 30th. So welcome to the show, Kate.
Thanks, John. I'm so glad you invited me.
Oh, I'm happy that you're here, but I figure, we're talking mystery, and there are going to be plenty of people watching this who know your face and think, I know her, but I know her as somebody else. So you sort of have dual identities. You are also known in the mystery world and in your everyday life is Liz Mugavero. So can you tell us a little bit about your two identities and how you settled on the name Cate Conte for some of your books?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started writing that, well, I've always written, but when I started getting actually published back in 2013, I published under Liz and with Kensington Books. And then when I started my second series, my Cat Cafe Mysteries, it was with a different publisher, so I had to come up with a different name. So I chose Cate Conte. Conte's my grandfather's name, and I always attribute my love of crime and mystery and murder to him because he was a detective. And even though he didn't really share any of his, really juicy stories with me because I was kind of young at the time, I like to think that he had this whole life of, crime solving, although I don't really think it was that exciting. But so I chose his last name, and then I just wanted to pick a name that went well with it. And so I chose Kate.
Sure, it's got a nice ring to it, and
Yeah.
he was a fitting homage, you know. Uh, so let me ask you, so I'm thinking that this sort of is a little bit of a rebranding for you because your new series is a little bit different. It's got a little bit of a paranormal twist on it, and your protagonist actually, she has a store, and I'm gonna make sure I don't say it wrong, but yeah, it's the Full Moon. So it's a crystal shop in North Harbor, Connecticut, and I've known you for a long time now, so I know that crystals are something that are very interesting to you. So can you talk about how you incorporated that interest into this book, and for people who don't know, what crystals are and what their healing power or benefit might be?
Yeah, for sure. So I've always been obsessed with rocks. So I told I told the story to somebody else recently when I was little. I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but it was kind of funny. And I don't remember it personally, but my mother loves to tell the story. So when I was little, she bought me a doll carriage and a bunch of dolls to go in them. And we were out walking one day, and I had my doll carriage, and this lady on the street stopped and said, "Oh, what a cute little girl! Can you show me your doll?" And so I pulled the blanket back in my carriage, and I had rocks in there. I was picking up rocks along the way and tucking them away in my carriage, and the lady thought I was really weird, but I didn't care. I love rocks. I've always collected them, and then when I discovered that you could actually buy them and spend money on them, and of course that appealed to me a lot. But yeah, when I went to school in Salem, Mass, which is, witch country. And so I really started to fall in love with all of that cool vibe. And, I spent a lot of time in crystal shops and learning about the different stones. And I mean, there's still stones that I have no idea even existed. I picked up a new one the other day that I never had seen before. Isn't it fun? Oops.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
very cool.
It's a ruby fuchsite. I don't even know if I can say it right, but it's supposed to be like an emotional healing stone. And I just thought it was really pretty. It was like all polka dot, but I never heard of the stone is my point. So while there's more commonly known crystals that have properties, so like, for example, rose quartz is supposed to be a really healing heart chakra based stone. Most people have heard of that. Amethyst is another one that people know about. But, I love finding the cool ones that I've never heard of, that other people have never heard of. And so when I wanted to create the series, Violet doesn't know that she's a witch when the series starts. And so I wanted her to have a job where she was kind of using her powers without really knowing she was using her powers. And so one of the things she does at her shop is she has private consults with people who come in and need like a crystal prescription, and so whatever is bothering them, she's trying to heal them with the stones, and she's thinking that she's just really good at stones, but really a lot of her powers are dormant but there, and so they're actually helping her give people that healing power.
Sure. And I don't know about you, but you held up the rock and I feel better.
Oh yeah, well, good. I'm glad. I can give you the name of my supplier.
People are going to wonder. Right, you can hook me up. So let me ask you then, and we'll come back to the witch ancestry in a little bit because I do want to get a little bit more into detail about that. But so, we have Violet Mooney, and she does own this crystal moon shop, and there are a lot of people who don't really understand what crystals are. And, they think it's sort of woo-woo, and even the town councilwoman, Claire Fernandez, who's really Carla Fernandez, sorry, she's really, disagreeable, and she basically accosts Violet in a coffee shop in a very public setting, and she accuses her of ruining the town's good reputation and saying she's doing things like seances and summoning evil spirits, which Violet really is not doing. But this is a murder mystery, so of course then Carla Fernandez turns up dead, and there's some incriminating evidence that's found, with the body, and Violet becomes the person of interest very, very quickly. So let me ask you, the thing I found interesting about that is having, Carla is the murder victim. She, like I mentioned, is not well liked by a lot of people. There are people who have grudges both personally and professionally against her, which actually is you would think a good thing for Violet, because even though suspicion has fallen on her, there are a lot of other suspicious characters. But then she realizes that these characters include her boyfriend, her best friend, pretty much all of her acquaintances in town. So can you talk a little bit about how that's sort of the gift and the curse of having a woman who's so disliked as your murder victim?
Yeah, so that was a bad day for everyone in the town, right? It was it was definitely a bad day for Carla, and it was a bad day for Violet and all her friends. No, it was a fun way for me to really have Violet's relationships and the life that she's cultivated in the town kind of come to life, right? So by having all these different people that were close to her, that had these um, sort of unknown to her relationships with Carla in some cases, like her boyfriend, she didn't really know what was going on with her boyfriend and this woman, and she had to, figure that out in the course of things. Her best friend had a tie to Carla that she would have had no clue about, right? So it was really, for me, it was an interesting way than just finding random suspects that could have killed her, and it was a different way to really introduce the cast of characters that's going to appear in the series. So.
Sure, and the thing I liked about it too is I think the problem that some people run into is, especially with amateur sleuths, like what is their motivation and is this really believable? But this was such a setup that, of course, you want to find out what happened because one, not only do you have to clear your own name, but all of these other people around you have now fallen under suspicion too. So I thought that was a really kind of clever setup. And I do want to ask you, we talked a little bit about Violet's ancestry, like, she works with crystals and she doesn't necessarily realize that she has powers that go beyond that. But she gets pulled into the police station, and by the time, she's let go, she finds that her mother, who she hasn't seen in, 20 some odd years, and a sister that she didn't even know she had, they are now in the town of North Harbour, because they knew that she needed help. So one, can you tell us a little bit about, her relationship with her mother, Fiona? But also, can you talk about how you balance, that element of the paranormal while still keeping a sense of realism?
Yeah, so great question. So Violet's mother, Fiona, she thought abandoned her when she was 5 years old, and she hadn't seen her since. And she was basically raised by her father and her grandmother, Abby. And when the book starts, her father had passed away a few years ago. Her grandmother had just passed away about a month or so ago. And so she was really kind of feeling alone and, not very happy with her family situation. And she had always felt that, her mother had abandoned her, and that as much as she tried to think she had gotten over it, she really hadn't. So she had a necklace that her grandmother had given her when she was 5, shortly after her mother left, and her grandmother had said to never take it off, and she never did. But when she was trying to get ready to go to the police station, she accidentally broke it because she was so flustered and stressed out. And she was horrified, but she figured, all right, I'll fix it tomorrow and it'll be fine. But the necklace was actually what allowed her mother to see her again. Because her grandmother was also a witch and her father was half a witch. And so all of this gets revealed when her mother and her sister show up at the police station, because Fiona sees it as her big chance now that she can actually get her daughter back. And so you may know, John, that my mother and I have had quite an interesting relationship, and mother-daughter stuff usually comes into play in my books. And so this was just another way for me to kind of explore that sort of relationship. So that's going to be kind of an ongoing theme, I think, as Violet tries to work through that, because she's still, in the first book, she's really wondering, can I trust this woman? She says she didn't abandon me, but now everything that my grandmother and my father have ever told me seem to be a lie. So she has to figure all that out. And so the thing with the witches is that they, have the ability to live among the mortals, but they can't, and there are certain things they can do to help the mortals, but they can't really interfere in mortal life. So there's a fine line there that, Fiona is is really pushing. So for example, they're walking down the street one day and Fiona really wanted to wear high-heeled boots, but it was the middle of winter, and Violet's like, you can't wear those shoes. And she's like, of course I can. And as they're walking, she's making the snow mounds melt and the ice melt so she doesn't fall. And Violet is mortified. But as long as she's not trying to use her powers to really like solve mysteries or change the course of the human lives around her, then she can play with it a little bit.
Sure. And I was reading it, and every time I thought of Fiona, I was thinking of like Angelica Houston and the witches, even though like physically I don't think they actually look anything alike, but that's all I hear witches and I think of her. But that's just me in my narrow mind, but I do love witches. But let me ask you too. So the majority of the book is told through Fiona's perspective. It's first person, but you do have some really cool chapters that are third person, and it's a different perspective, and you sort of get taken into a different realm. So how was that for you to write? Was it challenging? Was it liberating?
Yeah, it was cool. So the most of the book is written in Violet's perspective, and then the third person is Fiona. So yeah, for me, I wanted to be able to show a little bit of there were things that Violet had no clue about that the reader kind of needed to know, I think. And so for me, it was a way to be able to get that information to the story without Violet having to find it all out first. And I hadn't tried a multiple point of view in a cozy before, and so I was hoping I could slide it through. And my editor seemed to like it, so I think Fiona's going to continue to have a voice in the story going forward.
Awesome. Yeah, that was cool because I said, oh, this is different. I mean, I think I've read, well, all of your published books anyway, so it's just fun to say, oh, this is, something fresh. But I want to ask you too, so you have this town of North Harbor, Connecticut, which again, you like to, sort of take a combination of real places and then turn them into a fictional world. So can you talk a little bit about how this setting is informed by real life? Not, necessarily just physically, but also sort of the politics that inform a
Mhm.
town. And I think your background in journalism probably lends itself a bit to that too, because you get to cover all these stories about topics that get people all up in arms, even if you don't think
Yeah.
it's an engrossing story. They are live or die by it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so North Harbor is a twist on the town I currently live in, which is South Norwalk. I liked it because it had the waterfront aspect, but I also, as you said, like to fictionalize because you never want to kill somebody in the deli or the diner that you go to every day because they might spit in your food. So and I also need my towns to have certain things that the regular town might not have. So, for example, the Friendly Bean is the coffee shop in the neighborhood. And as much as I love my little neighborhood, we don't have a coffee shop. Like, it's always baffled me. And so I put a coffee shop. But aside from that, she's got a yoga studio, which I have. She's got a sushi place, which I have. And so it's a little urban town without having to be a giant city, which I really liked. So I stole those aspects of it. And yeah, so I used to be a reporter, and when I covered the city beat, it was my last reporting job before I sold out and moved to corporate life. I used to have to cover all of these town development issues and zoning and, all of the things that, like you said, were absolutely fascinating for the people who actually cared about them, but for the rest of the population, not so much. But yes, things like that I remember there was a story I covered about, it was a development or something that was trying to, a store that was supposed to go into a development, like a neighborhood development. And I mean, these people they couldn't even handle it. And it was the only thing that anyone could talk about for, I don't know, 2 months. And so it just got me thinking, something that people are really passionate about, it's going to be all the town cares about. And it's definitely fraught for murder. If you could have heard some of the closed door meetings, you definitely fraught for murder. So
Yeah, no, it's funny because as an outsider, you think, my God, like who would even care? But when you're in that sort of insular world, people would like maim and murder over these
yeah,
things. And if you watch Dateline, they often do.
yes.
But let me ask you this too. So there's obviously, a standalone mystery to this book. There's a whodunit that does get solved, but there are some, overarching themes as well too. So can you talk a little bit about what people who read this book, what they can expect to be carried through into future books?
Yeah, so this whole new world that Violet finds herself in, the witch world, is going to be full of a lot of mysteries for her. First so one of the reasons why Fiona wanted to find her when her grandmother passed away was because she was grandfathered into a seat so the magical council sort of works the way some governments outside of the U.S. might work, where there are certain seats that are grandfathered in, and then if those lines of you know what I'm trying to say, right? I can't find the words tonight. But if the lines that were eligible for those seats run out, then it would have to be opened up for a vote. So that's kind of what was happening here. And so Violet was her grandmother's last living relative that would have been eligible for one of these seats. And if she wasn't found in time to take it, then it was going to have to go to vote. And there was this other family that really hated the fact that both of Violet's really highly powerful families were in charge, and they were trying to get into that seat. So that's why it was super important for her to kind of own her heritage and take the seat and all of that. So there's also a mystery that might be related to her grandmother's death. So her grandmother was also a very powerful witch. And, Violet's mother, as much as she didn't like her grandmother because she had kept her away from her for so long, is very suspicious about the fact that she died at all, because she didn't really have to, given her powers. So that's a potential storyline that's going to carry through. And then there's also a witchy reporter who met a really strange fate in Violet's shop during this whole first book, and that's something that she feels compelled to look into. That's going to continue throughout at least the first 3 books.
Yeah, that was a very creative little twist. Not to give anything away, but people should just read it to figure out what happened to this woman.
Yeah.
I was like, what? That's great. I'm so glad we'll know more. So okay, I guess with this book we'll kind of leave it there because I don't want to spoil anything, but I think that, hopefully people will be intrigued by that because there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the book. But if you don't mind, I might ask you some more general questions
Yeah.
about your writing life and your interests and how those work themselves into your book. So I thought I would first ask you, people who've read your books, whether they're the Cate Conte books or the Liz Mugavero books, they probably get a sense that you are an advocate of a certain kind of lifestyle, like a very healthy, clean lifestyle. So people will find organic foods in your books. They'll find yoga, meditation, things like that. So can you talk about how you pull for things that are meaningful to you personally in the lifestyle sense, and you incorporate those into your books and into your characters' lives?
Yeah, it's kind of second nature to me now. Well, I should say before the pandemic, all of this stuff was second nature. I seem to have forgotten a lot of the really good practices over the that I've employed over the past 3 months. But nobody really needs to know that.
No
But yeah,
judgment here. It's all forgiven. 'Cause, I'm like cheese,
um,
cheese, cheese.
so I don't my character, but I try to write about. I try to make them real enough that by bringing in things that I'm familiar with and that I know can kind of add to the storyline. So in this case, Violet actually finds out a lot of in an upcoming book. She finds out a lot of information at yoga for one thing, and actually the yoga studio plays into the first book as well quite a bit. But for somebody like her who works with crystals and does all of that sort of woo woo stuff. It's very second nature for her to have that sort of lifestyle, but for me, I try to, my characters always have one really big vice, and it's common across all three of my main characters, and that's coffee. But I try to not give them any other really big vices aside from that, and I try to keep them pretty healthy otherwise, because I really want them to, stay in books for a long time. So
It's as good a reason as any.
trying to keep their mental health and their physical health pretty good, right?
That
They
is
can't
great.
solve mysteries if they're in the hospital. So
Yeah, I have never in all of my years of interviewing heard that rationalization before, and I kind of love it. It makes perfect sense.
well, you never know what you're going to get from me on a Friday night, John.
Oh, hey, no, I love it. I think that's great. I never would have thought. And I, of course, have to ask you too, because animals figure very prominently throughout your books. Your first series was 7 books, the Positively Organic Mysteries, and there were cats, there were dogs, there were other animals. Even in this new book, there's a couple cats. Violet has a cat named Monty. There's also this black cat that's very persistent and keeps showing up. So can you talk about how you give those animals really distinct personalities? Because the nice thing about your animal characters is that they really are kind of complex and dynamic. They're not always just the background characters, whereas in a lot of traditional mysteries, of course there's a cat there, but it's just a cat.
Yeah. Well, in my own life, I've had many, many, many animals. I still have a bunch of animals, and they all do have distinct personalities, and they are all like huge parts of my life. So it's not really far fetched for me. I work from home as well as for my day job as well as when I write. So I'm with my animals all the time. They're going to start barking. I'm just warning you.
Right, some of
um,
them they know.
yeah. But they have their own personalities. We each have a thing, right? With each of the animals I have, there's a little ritual that's just between me and that animal. And I don't know, they just complete my life. And so I feel like if I was writing about a character that didn't have an animal, that their story wouldn't be complete.
Sure. If I ever read a book of yours and there wasn't an animal, I'd be like, she's not writing these anymore. You don't
Yep,
all chase
ghostwriter.
Patterson. But actually, let me ask you about that too, because you talked a little bit before about the Cat Cafe Mysteries, which is the other series that you write under the same name, Cate Conte. So for people who aren't familiar with that concept, can you just talk a little bit about, what a cat cafe is and how it lends itself to that other mystery series?
Yeah, so cat cafes, they were actually born in so my series, they're a little bit of a twist in my series because, as usual, right? I like to have twists. The cat cafes are usually found in really urban areas like big cities, places where people have, tiny apartments and either can't have an animal or their landlords won't let them or they don't have time or whatever. And they can go and, pay $5 for an hour and hang out with a cat and have a cup of coffee and, pet the cat. Most of them are partnered up with rescue organizations. So if there is somebody who's in the market for a cat, they can adopt the cat too. So that's what they are. I believe they started in Japan, and they've been really kind of popping up all over the US in the past number of years, which is kind of cool. But in my series, my cafe is set on an island, which is a little weird, right? Because you would think it's not that big of a space, but through a series of circumstances, my main character, Maddie James, ends up opening a cat cafe, actually using her childhood home, her grandfather's home. And she's doing it to both help. She loves cats, but she's also doing it to help the rescue efforts on the island, which were sort of abandoned when the only rescue group on the island had to leave because they had no funding. And so now there's only the animal control, and they don't have a lot of room, and the cats were having to live with the dogs. And so she thought this could solve the problem, and so she decided to turn her house into a cat cafe.
Why not?
Yeah, hey, right? I did. Not an official one, but
I know, it's such a fun concept though, and I'm like, oh, we have cats and I like coffee. I've tried to charge people to like come here and drink coffee and hang out with my cats. Nobody wants to pay. Like, they do it for free, but
I'll pay, John. I'll come visit your cats.
You will. All right, well, my door is always open, just not right now.
Yes, I know. I'll wear my mask.
Yeah, right. So let me ask you too. So, the 3 series that
I have a visitor. Sorry. Meet Penny.
Oh.
Hi. That was perfect timing.
That's cute.
Yes, this is the one who bit me earlier.
Oh, she's making up for it now.
Yes.
Feel bad.
It was a love bite. I don't want your readers to get the wrong idea. She's really not vicious.
I know, you're really fine over there. So let me ask you, so people know you as a cozy author. Your series, I mean, we just classify everything, which can be a help. It can also be a great hindrance, depending. But, people who know you, know that you have a very colorful vocabulary. Not that I've ever actually heard it like you tell me this, but I don't think I've heard all that much of it. There might be
really
some, but not like anything like too crazy. I guess I just have to really piss you off sometime. But
I am the queen of F-bombs, and it's bad because at work I have to remind myself, do not swear in front of the executive vice president, please. So
good person to curb it back for, but so let me ask you, and I mean, I know that the earliest stuff I wrote of yours, and this goes back like 13, 14 years, was a little bit different, a little bit darker. So how do you kind of strike that balance? How much of it is your editor saying, well, you can't really do that even though you really want to? But also, do you find that writing cozies, does that confine you, or does it challenge you to be more creative?
I think it definitely challenges me to be more creative because I don't love guidelines very much, or anyone really telling me what to do. So I try to push the envelope as much as possible. I can't drop an F-bomb in a cozy. I get that, but there are times when I write it on the page and then I have to delete it because in the situations that my characters would find themselves in, my mind immediately goes to what I would say if that happened to me, and usually it's an F-bomb. So I'll write it, then I'll take it out. But I do try to, as far as not so much language, because I get that there are limitations there, but I do try to push the envelope a little bit as far as plot and just the different elements of the setting and the people, and how it all comes together. And I never wanted to be cute when I write. So I really try to stay on the far end of the cozy spectrum.
Yeah, I would say cutesy is not the word for you. And it's kind of funny. I mean, people talk about cozies, but if you've actually read a cozy, like, I mean, one, it's a murder mystery, so someone has died violently. Yeah. So right off the bat, it's not really a cozy thing. But the themes are much darker, and people's motivations are much darker, and the issues that are being explored are much darker. I mean, like drugs and prostitution and embezzlement. So, if you're not reading a cozy because you think it's cutesy, well, just try one of Liz's, Kate's, or, read a Leslie Meyer book, and you'll be like, oh my God.
Well, thank you, John. That's high praise.
It's the truth. I read them sometimes and I laugh because people think this is a cozy, and I'm like, this is really so dark. I mean, it's written just
I love
so.
that. That's the best compliment ever.
It's true. Like, I'll sit there and I'll be laughing, and Chelsea will be like, "What?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I'm reading this cozy, but let me tell you what actually happened and what this person said." It's great. I
It's
almost
so funny. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh. There was one author. So I was at an event a few years ago, and there's this author, and lovely person, and but I think he assumed that because I wrote cozies, and I don't think he ever read one of my books, but he knew who I was, he knew what I wrote. And I remember I was saying something about, I think I was mentioning that I was talking to someone else, and he overheard me, and I was saying I watched American Horror Story or something, and he had the most shocked look on his face, and I was like, what's wrong? And he's like, you watched that? And I said, yeah, it's my favorite show at the time, it was. And I said, why? And he said, well, I thought you were like the cozy cat girl who knits in front of the fire. I'm like, really?
Yeah, that's
Do I look like a cozy cat girl who knits? Not that there's anything wrong with knitting, but that's just not me.
I know, I was gonna say, like, the knitting needles are obviously gonna be used for
Yeah.
something else if they show up. All right, I have to say, like, one of my favorite scenes in all of your books was your last Liz Mugavero one, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but basically there's a chocolate bunny that gets boiled on the stove, and I'm like, this is everything, you know? That's
Yeah,
theory.
Murder She Me Out. And I actually can't take credit for that. So Jessie Crockett, Jessica, she's got a million names. Her current name is Jessica Ellicott. One of my wicked author friends. She and I have the most epic plotting sessions because I'm not a plotter, and I usually need help getting my book in some sort of shape so I don't have a panic attack at the end as I'm trying to finish it. But she is fabulous at plotting, and I think we were away at one of our wicked author retreats when we were plotting this book, and it just came out of her mouth, and I was like, oh my god, that's the best thing ever. And when I told my editor about it, he's like, we have to put that on the cover.
Yeah.
So that was all her. She takes
Oh, that's
all the
so
credit
funny.
for that.
But yeah, it's so funny because you look at the cover and there's this cute little cat and a cozy little kitchen, and then there's a chocolate bunny and a pot on the stove. Well done, and hats off to
I would
Jesse.
never boil a real bunny, so
No, I
I
mean, you
had to
really
settle for
can't.
the
That's a
chocolate bunny.
no-no. And cozy, yeah. Well, you're an animal lover anyway, but man,
Yeah.
you do whatever you want to people in the books, but you cannot harm an animal.
No.
Yeah. So actually, I was going to ask you about that. So you were talking a little bit about, how you're able to sort of collaborate with people in the sense that they can help you, with plotting, with talking things through, because, writing can be a very isolating experience because nobody's going to actually, write the book for you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not getting some kind of feedback all along the way. And you, are involved with some groups, and you do writers retreats, and you're very involved in each other's work with giving critiquing and feedback. So can you talk a little bit about those people and how you were able to sort of interact and keep each other sane while you're, committing this insanity of writing books?
Yeah, so the Wicked Authors, we are a bunch of we blog together on the Wicked Authors blog. And we have so many names that I'm not going to recite them all. But our current name, so it's Maddie Day, Jessica Ellicott, Sherry Harris, Barb Ross, and Julia Henry, but she writes under many names: J.A. Henriquez, Julianne Holmes. Like I said, we've all got multiple personalities upon multiple personalities. But these ladies are truly my lifeline. They are. We've known each other for many years, like throughout crime bake conferences and sisters in crime meetings and all of that. But we all kind of got published or got our contract and started to get published around the same time. So we kind of came together and formed this blog. And the best part about it is that we didn't just come together and form a blog. We actually formed a sisterhood.
Mm.
And so we are always emailing each other. Like I said, Jesse and I plot together. Sherry usually reads my books if I can manage to get them done, at least a day or two before the deadline. She'll read and she'll give me comments. Julie and I had, a plotting session the other day, just out of the blue. So we go on retreat every year, except for this year. This is so sad. This is the, stupid pandemic. This is the first year since 2013 that we have not been able to go away on a retreat together, which is really very sad. But usually we go up to either to Maine somewhere or this year I think we were going to try to hit somewhere in Massachusetts, and we had it all planned out. We had to cancel it, but we still virtually get on Zoom calls every couple months and try to remain connected. It's really great to have people to commiserate with, and to, like Barb is our numbers person, so she's always trying to help us, decipher our royalty statements or tell us about the blog metrics. And like I said, Jesse's the plotter. I'm the crazy person who always just needs somebody to get me back on track. We all have our quirks, and we all work well together. So it's a lot of fun.
I'm gonna say, well, one, if you got a royalty statement, good for you. That means you made money.
Yeah, but I don't know how to read it, so I don't even actually know if it's,
Yeah, right. Do you owe them money, or do they owe you?
Exactly.
But it's great, that you actually seem to like each other, which
We
nice.
do. And it's funny, people have commented, that they've read our blog, and that one of the things they like the most about it is that they can tell we're actually friends.
Yeah, it definitely resonates. And, that's got to be nice, because when you're writing, you do spend a lot of, time alone, holed up in your house. And then you need that reminder that there are other people out there sort of going through the same things that you are, suffering the same cruelties that come
Yep.
along with writing. But I have to ask you too, you're going to love this, but work-life balance. Actually, work-life balance, more like work-work balance, because you
Yeah.
have, a whole career and occupation outside of your creative writing. So can you talk a little bit about how you try to balance the two? Because I would imagine it's a lot of screen time for you. Like,
It is. And I've been failing miserably at any kind of balancing over the past few months. But yeah, I work in marketing communications. I work currently in the financial industry, so it's been a little bit of crisis mode the past few months with the pandemic. So it's been kind of nonstop. And this year, of course, is also the year that I have 3 books due. So I've turned in one, I have another one due in a month, and then I have a third one due by the end of the year. So this is the worst possible year to have a pandemic, especially one that affects my day job so much. But yeah, it's, I'm better in the morning. So if I can get my act together, I try to get some writing done in the morning. But usually my day job is really just so busy that, by the time nighttime comes, I'm kind of done. I try to get something done at night too, but the weekends are usually when I spend most of my time. And like, especially right now where I'm in the final push to get this draft done. I've actually been churning out like 6,000 words a weekend, which has been kind of good. So hoping to keep that schedule up so I can actually finish on time.
Sure. Yeah, and it's tough too, because and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. Technology is great when it works. But at the same point, nobody's ever really off the clock anymore, because people can always find you, and they just assume, if you can get on your phone or if you can get on your computer, that you are capable of working, not realizing that there's other work to be done, and that you might have some kind of social life that you want to get back to.
Social life? Really? We have those?
This is my social life. Fun times. All right, I got 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
And then I will let you move on with
I'm
your
ready.
one, and we hit on this briefly before too. So you have a background in journalism. Can you talk a little bit about the ways that has lent itself to your fiction in terms maybe of discipline? Obviously, there's a difference between writing fact and fiction, though you do need that sense of realism. But I would think, having to be on deadline and always churn out some kind of copy must be helpful when it comes to writing other things.
Yeah, no, I used to be much better at deadlines. For a while I carried that really seriously into my fiction life. There's been a few slip-ups, but no, I'm really deadline focused. You kind of have to be when you're a reporter, and especially, back in, I'm not sure really how it is now, but back in the day, it was always a competition between, the other newspaper, and if you don't get your stories in and the other guy scoops you, or the other guy or gal scoops you, then, you're going to hear about it tomorrow. So you don't want that to happen. So I was used to churning out a lot of copy pretty quickly. So, I guess it's true that I work well under pressure. I would really love to not have to put that into practice every single time I'm writing a book, but I suppose that's on me to figure that out. But I can, there might be a lot of crying, but I can always get it done by deadline usually. And yeah, it's the fact versus fiction piece for sure. I mean, I always have a I usually always have a reporter or some kind of newspaper person in my stories, just because I feel like you always need that balance because I make up stuff all day long, but I feel like in my towns and in the things that are happening, my characters kind of need that balance of someone keeping them honest, right? And so in the Positively Organic series that I write under Liz, the newspaper reporter was this really quirky guy, and he actually ended up becoming a pretty main character throughout the book, and even working with Stan on some cases later on. And I thought it was a really great way to show how a newspaper person works versus how, and in her case, she was a PR person. So she was used to spinning and avoiding reporters and all of that. So for me, it was a really fun dynamic to have her have to face the facts that the reporter was trying to get. Yeah, totally. We almost made it through.
No, we knew this was going to happen.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a really fun way for me to show how she would have to really accept the facts of the case and make that play into the way she was solving them.
Sure. And yeah, like you mentioned before, there's a great little reporter character in Witch Hunt, and she meets a great fate too. So you just have to read it to believe it. But all right, so my final question for you, as I always have to ask, and writers love this question because you finally have a book coming out into the world, and then everybody wants to know, that's great, but what are you working on now? So I do know that you have another book coming out by the end of the year. So can you give us a little teaser of that Cate Conte book, which is from your Cat Cafe mystery series?
Yes, so that one is book number 4 in the series. It's called Whisker of a Doubt, and it's a Christmas themed book, so it's kind of fun. We have I'll give you a little preview, but we have a character who is bashed over the head with a really ugly Christmas gnome and left to die in a snowbank. So
Must read.
so that was a fun one to write. That was also something Jesse and I came up with. I think we're dangerous together.
It's like, yeah, you two probably shouldn't hang out too much in person.
Probably not.
But
So yeah, that's coming out in, I think, December.
awesome.
And then I'm working on book 2 in the Full Moon Mysteries, which is tentatively titled Witch Trial.
Nice. All right. Well, you have been very generous with your time, as you always are. But I think we have to hold up our book covers because I can't remember if you've held yours up yet, but you have the beautiful final
I
copy.
just got it. You're the first one to see the real copy. It just came today.
That is awesome. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
Look at that.
thank you. I love purple, so I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's great. So anyway, the
Yeah.
book is Witch Hunt. It is the first in a brand new series, and it comes out on Tuesday, June 30th. So best of luck with the book, and I personally can't wait for number 2.
Thanks, John. I'm so happy you had me on.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.